Majesty is a premium health and wellness tea line focused on bringing delicious yet healthy tea blends to the community. Filled with an abundance of vitamins and antioxidants, we work to blend teas with exotic spices and fruits to produce scrumptious and wholesome beverages. So check us out at mymajesties.com. That's MyMajesties.com. My Majesties, an Urban Passport member.
This is Brian Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Wrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Wrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Sugar Chateau Desserts is a specialty bakery located in the Charlotte, North Carolina metro area. We will create delicious and one-of-a-kind treats for any occasion. Sugar Chateau is currently shipping cakes in a jar, offering a variety of different flavors in a single-serve container that can help you celebrate in accordance with social distancing. Place your orders today by calling 803-526-7895 or visiting sugarchateaudesserts.com.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time-consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your life, home, and auto policies. Bundling saves you money, sure, but it also saves you time, so you can enjoy the things that matter most even more. Contact me, Tammy Haynes, your local agent, for a free personalized insurance quote. Allstate, are you in good hands?
I'm attorney Clinton Paris, and Tampa's my community. I grew up here, went to school here, and my wife and I make our home here. What makes Tampa special are its people. So when I represent someone injured in my community, it's personal. Call my office and speak to a real lawyer and not some referral service. I will fight the insurance companies to get the settlement that you deserve. At the law office of Clinton Paris, we take the pain out of being hurt.
True Black Essentials is a retail opportunity to bring Black businesses under one roof, where every product on every shelf in every aisle will be Black owned and Black produced by people all over the world. Statistics show that the $1.3 trillion of spending power that we have as Black people can easily be turned into each Black person having $2 million if we were to shop Black for 2 years. So True Black Essentials will launch an e-commerce store on November 1st, 2020, but we will open up brick and mortar stores in Atlanta, New Orleans, Charlotte, Houston, and Jacksonville, with the very first store opening in Atlanta, June 19, 2021.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavill, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Ville with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. But holding the court for Mike Washington is my best man in my wedding, best friend out here in the marketplace, Mr. Alan Williams, joining the crew today. He is the host with the most in terms of the 1876 Sports and Culture podcast. You all seen him a couple of weeks ago when they came in and talked about the show. Now we have him in the hot seat. So we're going to see you and let him bring it hot and heavy. I seen you shaking it up a little bit. I like it. That's good. That's good. That means you got to flow with the show. I like that. So it sounds like you're ready to go. Go ahead and say hello to the people out there.
Good evening, everybody. Glad to be here in the hot seat, sitting in for Mike Washington. Glad to be here in the lab with Doc, the Dean of HBCU Sports. Let's get ready to chop it up, man. I'm looking forward to it. I've been excited all day.
All right, then. Well, class is in session. Charles, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Doc. We got a big, lot of action ready to go for this weekend, so ready to jump off into it.
I heard you got some breaking news, but let me get into this introduction, and I'll come back and let you break the breaking news. Welcome to episode 112 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast, the show that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports, from institutions large and small, from NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics, to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of what? HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to the KCOH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, none other than Ralph Cooper, in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. As we said, we have Alan Williams joining us, sitting in for Mike Washington. With that, let's go to Charles Bishop, as the professors are in session now. Charles, what breaking news do you have for us, sir?
Yeah, huge breaking news coming from the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. The MEAC, North Carolina A&T State men's basketball is out of the 2021 Air Force Reserve MEAC basketball tournament. A positive COVID-19 test within the North Carolina A&T State men's basketball program means that the team will not compete in the 2021 Air Force Reserve MEAC tournament. This is a statement from MEAC Commissioner Dennis Thomas. Obviously, we are tremendously disappointed for the student athletes, coaches, staff, and fans for North Carolina A&T State. They worked extremely hard to get where they are, and to have to end the season this way is extremely unfortunate. But that's the world we live in today, and hopefully we will have no other positives moving forward for the basketball tournament. As you know, Dr. Bill, North Carolina A&T, they came into the MEAC tournament. They were the number one seed from the Southern Division, and they were set for their semifinal matchup on Friday against the winner of tonight's quarterfinal matchup between number 2 Norfolk State and number 3 North Carolina Central. So huge news coming from MEAC today.
As the world turns, I think the commissioner said it right. It is the world we live in today. Let me go to Alan. What are your thoughts?
That has just got to be devastating for those players, man, to go through this season and all the protocols, the Zoom practices, all that changing of their lives to get to this point and coming out of it's got to hit them hard, man. I feel for those athletes, especially as they're getting ready to wrap up their involvement with the MEAC. They wanted to go out with a bang, but this isn't the bang they wanted to go out with, I'm sure.
You're right, because first you think about seniors are devastated, but we do understand that the NCAA sanctioned that literally seniors could come back. But the thing that makes it different, as you said, this time, they can come back. But if they come back, it's going to be as conference members of the Big South. Mm-hmm. No longer will they have a chance to do that final dance in the MEAC in terms of the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. So you're right. In a lot of ways, this is a different type of devastation We saw it a little bit 1 year ago today when the sports world stopped on a dime appropriately, but it stopped. And it just is amazing when you think about full circle. It just seems to be hauntedly obvious that in a lot of ways, while we're sick about it, that this is just the appropriate thing that would happen to tell us to wake up. I mean, we hear the news in terms of these governors talking about removing masks. And if this is not an indication, which it isn't because they don't care,
Right.
but for everybody else that may want to care and think about other people, maybe this is another little jolt of life being real. Far too many, over 500,000 people that we can't get back. And so just a serious note there, just to explain that in all seriousness. As we said, life will move on for a lot of the players, appropriately so, but this will not be one easy for them to swallow. So I'm glad that you all made those appropriate comments. Let me get back to a little bit more liveliness. Carl Edmund, Ricky, Burton, Rusty says, hey, y'all, Thursday lecture time. That's right. Joe Walker, looking forward to the show, but just saw the depressing news about my Aggies. Yes. We got you, brother. We're going to hold you live. We care. That's tough. Nobody wants to shout out for that. We got your back on that. Keep positive thoughts. What time is it? Yes, time for the election. Prime time. Yeah, prime time. Good evening inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Ready for the lecture. In the lab. Yes, Kate Johnson giving us that great news in there. Reginald Johnson, D.I. Love representing. Talking about it. Karen Griffin in the house. Just to shout out a couple of folks. Jarvis Austin, Chuck Hunt is always joining us, making sure that we get all the latest. Oh, brother Gerald Wayne Joseph, former president, Alpha Eta Lambda, also of Texas Southern University, proud alumni, backing the Tigers down there. Tigers got to win. We'll talk a little bit about that. Their first opening Tigers started out slow, but boy, did they turn on the gas as they got going. Meaning you got a big matchup, 2 and 3, chalk. It'll be interesting. These teams had not played this year, so it's another chance where you see almost every game, it seems, in the MEAC first round, you had it going on, but that's going to come to the SWAC. Jarvis Austin, Sandra McCoy. With that, let me stick with you, Charles, and see if you can give us some news of the day. And then, Alan, as we doing that, let me know if there are any additional HBCU sports news of the day that you want to share after Charles jumps on.
Sure thing. Well, let's take a look at the Southwestern Athletic Conference. Their Player of the Week honors came out yesterday for football. Arkansas Pine Bluff, Skylar Perry, Jackson State's Aubrey Miller, and Alabama A&M's Troy Linvey were all named SWAC Football Players of the Week for their outstanding play this past week. Let's take a look on the offensive side. Skylar Perry from New Orleans, Louisiana, accounted for 281 yards, 4 touchdowns in UAPB's win at Southern. He was 22 of 37, 223 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And he also had 58 yards to boot. Career high touchdowns for the Golden Lions in their first win over Southern Dr. Field since 2012. Take a look at the defensive side of the ball. Aubrey Miller from Memphis, Tennessee, registered 18 tackles, 10 solo tackles, a tackle for a loss, and a forced fumble for Jackson State's 33-28 victory over Grambling. He forced a fumble at the Grambling as Grambling was driving from the 2-yard line and had the ball second and goal from it says the one, it's actually the 2-yard line. The forced fumble for Jackson State was perfect.
You act like you were really watching that. Did you see it?
It preserved the Tigers' victory. So the Jackson State Tigers' victory. And finally, the specials of the week was Troy Linvey from Montreal, Canada, made an impact in his first game on the collegiate level as he helped Alabama A&M play field position and prevent South Carolina State from getting any momentum. He racked up 203 yards on a 40.6 punt average. He also had 1 touchback and a pair of 50-yard punts or better, including a long of 59 yards. So those are your SWAC players of the week in football.
Good stuff there, Charles. Great breakdown. Shout out, if you can't get some type of player of the week for a play like that by Jackson State, I just don't know what to say. So kudos to him. You talking about a big-time play. My draw dropped. Because I would tell you, as I said I was going into it, I was like Coach Prime, should they let them score? I say, just let them score. Just let them score. Your offense they can get it back. The time, you ain't gonna do nothing. Pop. Say, all right.
Yep.
Let me sit on the couch.
Yeah, I think I went hoarse, Dr. Cavill, real quick. We were about to go live, getting ready to do the post game with the Jackson State podcast, the live version that is, and I had to hold up for about 30 seconds because I was screaming there.
No, you didn't. Did you lose it for a minute there? Oh,
I lost it for a second. I lost it if I had to bring it back down.
Fandom. That's all right. Keep it real. Alan, give me some news. What do you got? I know you were a little bit excited too coming down to that Prairie View last play. You can show out.
Man, yeah, I was. And I was glad. I thought we got a little bit of home cooking at the end of the Prairie View game, but hey, that's what home is for. So we'll take it. But yeah, the end of that Jackson State game was just, man, you just got to feel like they got angels out in the outfield over there at Jackson State right now. You know, seem like the angels are saying, "Thee I like." And the Angels not the only ones right now, because ESPN has announced that they're moving the makeup game against Mississippi Valley up to the Deuce. They're going on ESPN2 on Sunday instead of on ESPN3. So the viewership of the Jackson State Grambling game was so good that they are moving that up. So shout out to Dr. Charles McClellan, doing a great job marketing the SWAC. This spring football season is just phenomenal exposure for the brand of football that we have in the SWAC. And every game has been exciting so far. And I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit later in the show, but every game has been fantastic. Yeah,
it's been great. I mean, you couldn't plan this. I was like, when we were interviewing Charles from Sunday, and you can go check that out, inside HBCU Sports Lab on our YouTube page. And we had an interview with Charles talking about the matchups, and he gave some great information, including that. But you're right. One of the things that I told him, I said, you must be living right. Let me get a piece of that foot that you got in your pocket or something, because Lucky Rabbit foot, man, you talking about cancel, a couple of games canceled the first week, but then all of a sudden when everybody shows up, they show out. Oh, wow. It was amazing when you talk about that. What other news you got, Charles?
Let's take a look at the baseball players of the week from the SWAC. Alabama State's Christopher de Guzman, Grambling State's Cameron Buford, and Alabama State's Osvaldo Mendez were the SWAC baseball co-hitters and pitcher of the week. We take a look at Guzman. He hit .545 in 3 games, collecting 6 hits in 11 official at-bats. He also had 4 extra base hits, 3 doubles, and a triple against Sanford in Eastern Michigan. He also scored 3 runs and drove in 4 RBIs. Cameron Buford, he went 5 of 11 with 2 home runs, 2 doubles, and 5 RBIs, and 4 runs scored this past weekend during Grambling State's game versus Memphis. And Mendez, he came out of the bullpen in the first inning against Eastern Michigan with the bases loaded and logged 5 innings of work, allowing just 1 run on 3 hits with 8 strikeouts. So those are your baseball players of the week.
Nice. Charles, what you got in the background today? Do you got the whole HBCU?
You got the Jackson State on them again.
Alabama A&M and Grambling's women are going at it right now. They're coming up on halftime, but Alabama A&M is up 25-24.
Nice. You had FAMU in terms of the MEAC halftime. You had 29-20 in that game, but you just talked about baseball. Man, I was going to watch the Prairie View game and saw that Texas A&M were playing. It's embarrassing for me to state. 7th inning shortened game. Texas A&M 22, Prairie View 2. I was like, ouch.
Is that mercy rule?
Yeah, mercy on me. That's for sure. Ooh, my goodness.
That was ugly.
Still better than that. What other news that you got, Alan?
Well, I am really looking forward to the track and field outdoor season. The indoor season was very competitive, and of course, the Lady Panthers of Prairie View A&M won the indoor championship, and they are starting to show out again as they went to the Texas Invitational last week. We had won the high jump. We're in the mix. We got a lot of points on the field side coming, so I'm really excited for the spring track and field. Both my kids ran track, so I'm a track addict. I like sitting outside all day for about a minute and a half worth of running, but I'm looking forward to this track season for the SWAC.
Yeah, that's right. I do recall now. You're a track dad, so you get into the little track. I see you and then telling folks a little bit about the track, what you know there. Good stuff. Good there. Let me give some updates here, and let me see what your thoughts are before we see if there are some other things that you want to bring to the table. CBS Sports to broadcast HBCU All-Star Game beginning in 2022 from HBCUsports.com brought you that news. CBS Sports and HBCU All-Star LLC, a Black-owned sports marketing and event company founded by Travis L. Williams, have partnered to create HBCU All-Star Game. The college basketball game showcases highlighting the best HBCU players in the country. The event, which starts in 2022 in New Orleans, will be played on Sunday of the Final Four weekend in the host city, airing live on CBS. Big time. In addition, in the first year of the initiative, Viacom has donated $100,000 to the United Negro College Fund to establish the scholarship fund, which is available to current students attending HBCUs who have demonstrated an interest in media, entertainment, and sports, as well as shown strong leadership ability. Generally, I think it's going to be like 5 internships in partnership with that. What's your thoughts on that, Alan?
Well, I support anything HBCU. Let me start with that. But it kind of feels like a consolation prize to me. I want our schools playing in the Final Four. I don't want to play in some Sunday consolation game. I want to play in the Final Four. You know, we can start pulling some of these athletes with this big movement. You saw the NBA All-Star Game where HBCUs were highlighted. You're seeing a lot of kids making some choices, especially those kids down the street here in Austin who got to stand up for that song. They might start making some different choices. You know, you have options. You got Texas Southern 3 hours away, you know, Prairie View 2.5 hours away. So, you know, I want to get some of those athletes at our school so we can play in the Final Four and they can keep that All-Star game. Just my thoughts.
Especially as the week of the Final Four. I hear you. I told you he's a heavy hitter. 1876 Sports and Culture podcast. Check it out. That's what that team does. They bring it and they hold back none. Charles, what are your thoughts on this? And then you can add some thoughts on Allen going in there. I saw you kind of tweak your head.
Hey, I looked up. I said, Allen going in early. I ain't bad. I mean, he's puncturing that soft bigotry of low expectations in terms of, you know, looking at this All-Star game. So it's like, nah, I want Final Four. So, wow, okay, well.
I feel you. Puncture, say it again. I think some people missed that. Say that. that was pretty.
We laugh a little bit about a phrase, the soft bigotry of low expectations. And I think we've been challenged to think higher, think above where we've been thinking thus far. So kudos to Allen for saying, nah, I want more.
Oh, no doubt about it, man. That was hot and heavy. I like that take, Allen. Go ahead. Charles, what you got?
Yeah, we can, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later on, but of course, Black College Nines, they came out with their rankings this past week. So definitely we'll get into the baseball a little bit, but very interesting thus far in terms of teams making some early statements this past weekend. Jackson State with a sweep of Alabama State. You also had Texas Southern with a sweep of Prairie View and Southern with a sweep of Grambling. So we'll see some fluctuations definitely with regards to Black College Nines opening poll ranking on baseball.
Man. I knew you was going to find a way to get a little bit of that baseball in there. That was pretty good. Let me give a shout out to Fred with it. You know, I purchased his book, History of HBCU Sports, and so I'm going to have to show that out a little bit, make sure that show that book out. I appreciate the love. Make sure I got a copy of the book. Sandra McCoy jumped in here, giving us Carl Edmond. Chad Cooper's in the house, as always. I see. With much love. I appreciate it. Let me give you an update before we go a little bit more into the baseball component there. I did want to get some information to give you at least the top 5 of the small division and the large division before we move forward, and you can give us some breakdowns of some of them big games you got there. Let's go into the small ranking. You can go to blackcollege9.com and get the entire top 10. I'm going to give you the top 5 in the small and the large school poll rankings. At number 5, Florida Memorial University was 8-8. This is the first week of the release of the poll, so everybody is going to be ranked where they are. At number 4, Virginia State CIAA 3-0 on the season thus far. And number 3, you have Savannah State out of the SIAC. As we know, they moved down from the MEAC a couple of years ago, and they've been playing really well. They are 2-0 on the early season this far. And then you have Albany State, that is always a solid SIAC program. They sit at 7-2, and they played most of the games out of a lot of the teams out of the Division II side getting it done. Then you have Kentucky State sitting at out of the SIAC at the number 1 ranking. They come in with a record of 4-0. That matchup between Kentucky State and Albany State will be very fascinating, even if it comes down to the tournament time. So before I give your thoughts on either one of those polls, let me go into the large division and see whichever one you want to talk about a little bit. You have Alcorn State out of the SWAC sitting at 3-0. They're at the 5 spot. Just outside of the 5, I'm going to give a little love to Texas Southern University. They did have that sweep over Prairie View A&M University. They sit at 3-9. We know the type of schedule they play. But at number 4, North Carolina A&T, Aggies are in the mix out of the MEAC, 4-7 on the season thus far. At number 3, Southern University, surprising some folks. People thought maybe the magic was done. A lot of those Southern fans over the Jaguars told us, not so fast, my friend. They are sitting at 4-6 on the season and get the 3rd position here. And number 2, North Carolina Central. This should be a fascinating story to watch all year long. I'm going to be frank with you. I'm rooting for North Carolina Central. 7-3, obviously. They already have talked about that they are disbanding the baseball program out of this after this season. So that's a tough part. We've seen that happen in Winston-Salem State. They did crown the champions, had a marvelous final season, went deep into into the NCAA Division II playoffs, relatively speaking, but they closed that chapter on their baseball season. So it'll be interesting to see what Central does this year. And number 1, Jackson State, man, the power brokers. Can we not talk about Jackson State enough? No, we're going to give them some more love. They are number 1 in the large division, 6-5, and they deserved it. They had a sweep. Let me say that again. They had a sweep over Alabama State in the Eastern Division. That was an early season matchup where most people thought were the top 2 teams out of the Eastern Division. And some people would say the top 2 teams out of the SWAC. Obviously, Southern and Texas Southern may argue about that a little bit. Sure. And Grambling, for that matter, as they were picked to win the West Division, but they got swept by Southern earlier this past weekend. As we just talk about a little bit of baseball as we get into the hardwood next before we really take a deep dive into basketball coming up this season. Any thoughts, starting with you, Charles, in terms of small schools or large schools in the top 5 of the top 10 rankings for large and small of the blackcollege9.com?
Well, let me give a shout out to Russ College baseball in the small college
There you
poll.
go. You gotta do that, do you?
I live with a Russ College alum, so let me make sure that I mentioned Russ College taking 2 or 3 from Tougaloo. They sit at the number 6 spot right now. They really gave it to Tougaloo in terms of what they were able to do on the base pass. So they were averaging 7 steals per game against Tougaloo in that series. So huge shout out to Russ College, their baseball program. When we take a look at the large schools, Alcorn, a surprising 3-0 to start out the season. Pivotal matchup with Jackson State this weekend. And you mentioned Jackson State, number 1 in the poll this weekend. This first poll, taking out Alabama State. That was a bit of a surprise. Alabama State has been a real thorn in Jackson State's side for the past maybe 5, even 6 years now, in terms of really being catapulting themselves to be the preeminent baseball program up there in the SWAC East. So to get that sweep, that was an early statement for Jackson State baseball.
No doubt about it. Great points you make all the way around. And big games to look at this weekend. It just doesn't get much better right now in the spring in terms of all the action. Let me go to Al and let me see what your thoughts on either one of those top 5 polls or some of the games coming up this week.
Yeah, I mean, Jackson State is everywhere right now, man. I can't remember a time where we had another HBCU that was having a renaissance like Jackson State is having right now. We're talking football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, volleyball. It's just, hey, Jackson State is having a moment, and you know, I'm PV to my heart, but I do like. So congratulations to Jackson State. Now, for baseball, I think you have to keep an eye on that North Carolina Central team. You know, they've won 7 out of their last 10 games. So don't sleep on them. They're going to come in hot and heavy, you know, because they got some bats out there. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this progresses, and I'm so excited to see a lot of these games being broadcast on ESPN3. You know, when is the last time we've been able to watch SWAC baseball on television?
Oh man, beautiful point.
Yeah. I mean, this is just I'm in sports heaven right now.
You're right. I mean, I can't get enough iPads going, televisions going, with all the action going on. But I really like what you said about North Carolina Central. Obviously, Jackson State is making a statement, doing what they are supposed to do in a lot of people's eyes. But as I said, I'm rooting for Central, the Eagles, in a lot of ways. And when you talk about a team that has motivation, I mean, they want to make a statement in their last season. It wasn't anything to do with them in terms of the decision. And so they're going to keep their heads up. They're going to fight. So it's going to be interesting for me to really keep an eye on seeing what they will do. As I said, we've seen this before. We've seen it with Salem State, and we all wondered, would they have a letdown? And then when they got to going, that confidence went. They took it all the way into the playoffs and made a nice little run there, which eventually came to an end. But it wasn't because they didn't have it. And you talking about capping off what others people have made a decision and putting your name in the record book in a positive way. They did that. Well, let's turn the switch a little bit. Let's get into some baseball, unless there's some other, into some basketball, unless some other news that y'all want to share quickly. I'll say that. But with that, let's go ahead and get into some basketball. I'm going to start, Shivery's not there. We're going to start with the women's basketball yesterday, and then we'll talk about some of the games this morning in terms that were played across the board. But in terms of women's basketball, you have Texas Southern University. Coach Cooper, Cynthia Cooper, couldn't do the magic this year. It'll be interesting to see what she does next year. She doesn't have 2 down years. You know, she's motivated. A couple of players are hurt. Ladies had a different disposition, and COVID was just not what she wanted to do. But credit to Alabama State, who is certainly looking like they have a statement that they're trying to make. 85-69. Payback is everything, and they certainly made their statement as they're moving on to the semifinals. And then Jackson State made sure no such thing as a rivalry game for them in the tournament. They defeat Valley 70-47, put Valley out of their misery for the season as well. Those folks can get on the bus, go home, take care of themselves. But the Alabama State and Jackson State, it looks like a collision course for me. Obviously, there's some other folks that have some other statements that they want to make in terms of what's going on. But I'm fascinated with that. And then obviously earlier this morning, you had Southern 73-59. They did defeat Alabama State earlier this season, which took Alabama State essentially out of a share of a co-championship, because they did split with Jackson State earlier this season as they lost the last game in exciting fashion. And then you have Alabama 8 up on Grambling 25-24 as you head into the halftime there. So fascinating matchups. Let me jump in and let you say what you say about the SWAC, and then we'll talk a little bit about the MEAC that kicked off the day. Let me go with you first, Alan, in terms of your thoughts yesterday on the women's side of what took place in the SWAC tournament.
Well, I mean, Jackson State, once again, is the story. They are not letting off the gas. You saw how they ran up and down the court on Mississippi Valley, and right now they are looking very hard to beat. They are looking very hard to beat. I'm really interested to see this quarterfinals. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be real interesting with Jackson State on that collision course, like you said.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Charles, what do you go in there in terms of some of these scores? Yesterday from the SWAC, today from the SWAC, and as we said, we'll get into a little MEAC love as we continue the discussion with women's basketball.
Yeah, everything went according to plan in terms of what happened yesterday. Jackson State and Alabama State took care of business. Like you mentioned, Dr. Bill, it seems as though they're on a collision course, but the stars came out. If you take a look at for Alabama State, Ayanna Manuel, Shemaya Ward, Jayla Crawford, they all did their thing, if you will, in that game versus Texas Southern, especially Ayanna Manuel and Shemaya Ward. They just give you such problems with their length and their height. in terms of rebounding. They keep offensive possessions alive. And it's the same thing with Jackson State. The Stars, Misha Williams, Deja Robin, they came out for Jackson State. So it's going to be very interesting to see if there is a team like a Southern that can be the flying ornament, if you will, because Southern did knock off Alabama State earlier this season. So, and you can't, when you take a look at a team like Southern, Genovia Johnson, she's a heck of a ball player. And once they got up and rolling today, they look very formidable. So Southern and Alabama State, that's going to be an interesting matchup.
Let's shift over to the MEAC, and then we'll come back to the SWAC for the men. But let's shift over to the MEAC. This morning, they kicked off the tournament in terms of their quarterfinals. Norfolk State, 56 over Coppin State, 45 in that early round game. And then you had Morgan State get it done against Central. Morgan State had to come back. Central had their game early and was scaring a lot of folks. Morgan State turned it on and got it done. And they get out of there with a 10-point victory, defeating the Eagles 74-64 in terms of women's basketball, just to give you some updates there. And then you had in terms of what that looks like. So let me know your thoughts in terms of the MEAC side of it. Stay with you, Charles, and then we'll go back to Albert.
Howard, I think, is the team that I'm watching over there in the MEAC, but their 2 conference losses were to Morgan State. So that's going to be a very interesting matchup to see, can Morgan State pull off the trifecta over Howard.
Yeah, great point. Good catch. I like you digging into numbers. Howard,
that's what you got to do, Professor.
Yeah, because I heard you talk a little bit about everything going to chalk. I said, he's going to pull out the chalkboard in a minute. Everything's going to according to plan.
Well, that's the way it looks over in the MEAC. I mean, they got the number 1 and 2 going into the final, right? You got Howard and Norfolk State. So everybody's handling their business. Everybody's holding serve. So that's the way it's set up, and that's the way it should be. Let's see what HU has got coming. They are also having a really good year as far as pub for the school, with Madam Vice President being sworn in, and Howard's on one. Now the men's side is a little different, but hey, shout out to the women. They have all the attention right now, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. They do have a lot of attention. They always like to talk about the Mecca. So, and then they had the announcement with the Maker Market coming in. Obviously, they didn't quite work out in a lot of different reasons for men's basketball, but the statement in the pub they got was big enough, in my opinion, just to kind of kick things off in a lot of ways. Let's stick with the MEAC in terms of the men's. Their quarterfinals, they do women in the morning and then the afternoon session of the men's, which is different than the SWAC that does a men and women showcase in the morning and then the nightcapper in terms of that. With that, you have early in the, halfway through the second half, you have Morgan State has now gotten back into the lead, and they have a 1-point lead against FAMU, the Rattlers, 49-48, 11:52. That looks like it's going to be classic going down to the wire. But we might give you some pointers there in terms of what's going on. Won't ask you to really talk about that because we're in the mix, but I did want to give the update in terms of what's going on. But I did want you to speak about what's your thoughts were with the SWAC basketball tournament yesterday. You had the early statement by Jackson State against Pine Bluff. That's the one I said keep your eyes on. Close a little early, but Jackson State, no, they looked real prepared even into the first half. They turned it on and looked like they were really focused in that matchup, and they made a statement closing it out 74-62. I want to give a special shout out to Kanan McCullough, a transfer from Texas Southern University, second-year senior. A lot of folks were questioning him, whatever, but he showed up and showed out and made a statement and did it where it counts on the court. Man, he was going berserk from the 3, put them in a very comfortable, and then he made some great defensive stops and plays to make sure that Pine Bluff didn't get back in the matchup. So shout out, Kanan. I watched that young man grow up, and so it was a pleasant surprise to see him get it done. Knew he could, but to see him get a chance in the limelight to show out, looks like he's on a mission. Seems like he wants a championship in terms of the tournament, representing 2 institutions. You don't get that a lot. 1, multiple championships, regular season, he's done that. Check that box off. Now he can sneak in and do the double-double. Can he get a tournament appearance for Jackson State University. Now, I know some folks out there, Prairie Wise, not too fast, Texas Southern say, hold your horses. But give me your thoughts in terms of the game. When you had PV turn it on, talking about PV, Valley, man, they just showed up, showed out. They look like they hungry to make their own statement. And so if we can get that, I don't want to count everybody else out, but if we can get that Prairie View Jackson State matchup, because they finished co-champions in the regular season undefeated, so they certainly have shown they earned it from that. If we can get that matchup in the tournament, man, it's a lot of folks that are going to be looking forward to that. Go and do what you will, Allen, Jackson State, Pine Bluff, Prairie View Valley. What's your thoughts in terms of those first round quarter?
Well, like I say, everybody's holding serve. And, you know, like you said, if we can get that Jackson State Prairie View matchup that got canceled during the regular season, I'm looking forward to it because, you know, you got Tristan Jarrett over at Jackson State, the 6'4" senior, kind of leading the SWAC with 20.1 points per game. If I can see him go head-to-head with Jawan Grown Man Daniels.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Man, you talk about a matchup. Those two guys might be making it at the next level before it's all said and done. You know, Jawan Daniels went off again last night with a season-high 36 points. I mean, he has just been in a zone for the last month, and it's great to watch. And then you look at Javius McKinnis from 6'7" junior out of Jackson State. You know, he's averaging a double-double. So you've got some stars in that Jackson State and that Prairie View game. And you throw in Cam Mack, who has just been, I think he was number 2 in the nation in assists during the regular season. So that's the matchup that I'm waiting for. I'm ready to hit the fast forward button and say, let's get to that. I know I'm not supposed to do it, but that's kind of where my head is right now because, you know, these teams are balling. They're balling. Both went undefeated in the SWAC.
Man, I really love what you broke down there, and you're right. A lot of people are sneaking peek, but there's a team laying in the weeds. Yeah. And I'm going to let Paul talk about the previous games, but also in terms of the early game that came in that we talked about with Texas Southern. Started out maybe a little slow, got their rhythm, and it looked like they were making a statement. 78-55, Texas Southern Tigers over Alcorn, and then you got the nightcapper, which I'll have my eyes on with Grambling and Southern, talking about the Bayou Classic on the hardwood for the men's. That would be fascinating in terms of the two types of gumbo that were going on there. Or as Coach would say, they don't cook gumbo in the North in terms of where he's from. So maybe it's the red beans, difference in red beans and rice from the North and the South. We'll talk about that. But Charles, you know, y'all do catfish over there in that word. So you tell me, mix it all up and tell me what you think about these 4 matchups as we start to getting a clearer picture going down the stretch.
This is going to be really interesting. Watching Prairie View the other night against Mississippi Valley, you said it. I mean, Jawan Daniels, grown man, Cam Mack. I mean, the way they had that 2-man game working, Cam Mack being able to penetrate the dish and kick it out to Jawan Daniels. I mean, Prairie View is as formidable as any team out there. Jackson State, they now dating back to February 29th of last year, prior to COVID, they have a 17-game SWAC win streak, and they looked apart really good the other night. You had 4 guys that had 10+ points. You mentioned Kanan McClellan, Tristan Jarrett went for 20, Jonas James had 17. You had Javius McKinnis 13 and 11. But this matchup with Jackson State and Texas Southern is going to be really good. I talked to Johnny Jones this afternoon in the post-game press conference, and he said it's going to be unique trying to scout them in that they have not seen them this season. And I think you got some great scores on both sides. Michael Weathers for Texas Southern and Carl Nichols. Yeah, he has really come on for Texas Southern in terms of what they're able to do on the offensive side of the ball. And then you have that with Tristan Jarrett and Jonas James from Jackson State. So very intriguing matchup. I wish I was as confident we could get to Prairie View and Jackson State in the finals, but Texas Southern is going to be a very, very tough team with their length and their athleticism for Jackson State.
Man, that's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Let me give a shout out to my boy here, Blake Green, Texas Southern University. for Tessier School of Business alumni chapter. They were looking to raise $20,000 in the middle of the pandemic for scholarships. I just got a text after I donated a little early today. They raised and hit the mark. They're at $20,460.27. I'm the one that snuck in that. I made sure that it had to have 27 for 1927. Those that understand my madness, I do that at Prairie View for the 1876. There's something about always making that statement. So credit to Blake Green for getting that done as we continue to raise money. And shout out to Alan, as I've seen him do a lot of work in the background with Toyota. His responsibility to make sure that Toyota's on the front end supporting HBCUs. And shout out to you. Kudos to you live for doing the things that you do, making sure that you represent not only out of your own pocket in terms of what you earn and take home, but also in terms of matching funds and things like that and the other gifts that Toyota is doing. And we might sneak out and hear a little more of what that even means for a bigger picture with the SWAC. We'll keep that on hiatus. That might sneak out there a little bit, but we'll see if we can see if that can happen as well. So kudos to that. With that being said, let's get into football. That's what people want to talk about a little bit. We didn't spoil them with all the other sports, and we showed that we had the skills, but this is where it is. I know the first game is Saturday between PV and Grambling, but I'm going to start backwards. I'm going to start Sunday with Mississippi Valley State and Jackson State, because you just talked a little bit about Jackson State and Mississippi Valley State, and so you know a little bit about the rivalry. So I'm going to start with you, Charles, and spoil you a little bit. You the home team, main person on the show. Alan is a guest, so we're going to save the best for last or the best first, however you want to put it. So we're going to let you show out a little bit. Tell us your thoughts first on the Mississippi Valley Jackson State game.
Well, first and foremost, when you take a look at this game, more than anything, Jackson State is going to get Valley's right cross or their Joe Frazier left hook. I mean, they play Jackson State tooth and nail. They play them extremely hard. Talk to Jerome Blake, who's the longtime PA voice for Mississippi Valley State, and it's within the DNA of Mississippi Valley State's football culture to beat Jackson State. He told us about when Coach Comergy got there, he had to kind of take a sign down because the focus was on beat Jackson State. And he's like, nah, we trying to win the SWAC. So that DNA is within that football culture of Mississippi Valley. So I think it's going to be, a hard fought game, but I think that win Jackson State had against Grambling, it means something. It really means something to get that win against Grambling, to get that 400-pound gorilla off Jackson State's back. And we'll see if they can carry that momentum into this Mississippi Valley game. The one thing that I think Coach Prime and Coach Sanders is not going to allow within this program is for a malaise to come over the program. So if you're a Jackson State fan, you got to feel good moving forward from that Grambling game.
Oh, great point when you talk about that. Let me go to Alan, show it out a little bit and tell me what your thoughts on this Mississippi Valley Jackson State. You already talked about that it's been flexed from ESPN 3 to ESPN 2. That's one part of the big news. But this is a conference game. Let down anything that you think about a letdown, or is Jackson State ready to take that next step? What are your thoughts in this matchup?
Well, this will be Valley's first outing of this spring season. And Jackson State has already got 3 under their belt. So even if this was an even matchup, the fact that Jackson State has had 3 opportunities to kind of work the kinks out will still give them an advantage. And with all the dogs that Coach Prime brought in, it's going to be a tough Sunday for Valley, and that's my prediction. You look at Jackson State, and it goes back to that old, the young bull, old bull, where young bull would walk down the hill and get a cow, and the old bull will I'm sorry, I messed that up. I pulled the George W. on you. The young bull's going to run down and get one, and the old bull's going to walk down and get them all. Well, Jackson State is showing themselves to be that old bull. I counted them out last week. After that fumble right on the goal line, I counted them out. I said, this is over, Doc. I remember you sending me a text, hey, they should let them score. And before the thing, before I could even respond.
You sure right.
You know, I'm standing up looking
The
at
play.
like,
What y'all
just
calling
happened?
it? Calls? Do y'all got a name for that? Y'all need a name for that, man. Give me a name. Come
You
on,
need
man.
a name for it, man. I mean, so I look for Jackson State to pull this one out. I just hope we have a good showing now that the game is going to be broadcast on ESPN2. So I hope we get a good football show here coming Sunday with Mississippi Valley and Jackson State.
I like that. That's a great point you make. As we start to wind it down and get ready to close it out, let's shift over a little bit. Prairie View and Grambling. And before they do that, I got some other breaking news. Man, we're breaking all kinds of news today. I'm hearing that it's official. We'll see when it's ready to come out, or maybe it's just the Prairie View alumni sticking their names out there. But I'm hearing that there is going to be officially a Prairie View homecoming in November. November 6th is the date. And so this is crazy. I don't know how to think about this, good, bad, and different, as I've been chiming everybody else. I guess in anything else, make sure you have your Prairie View mask on if you're going to go and do your thing with the homecoming. But it'll be fascinating to see what's going on. But getting back into the action, the news that we're really talking about, much like we had with Valley and Jackson State, it was supposed to be the opening weekend type games. But because of the freeze at the time, they had to push this game back along with Prairie View and Grambling. State Fair Classic, as everybody knows, it's been moved from the Cotton Bowl, so that's one difference in this matchup. Obviously, Grambling's coming off a loss. Prairie View's coming off a rivalry victory over Texas Southern. But it now becomes extremely important in terms of those next steps. Obviously, Pine Bluff had the win over Southern, so Pine Bluff is sitting at 1-0 in terms of it. Technically, Southern is sitting at 2-1 because they have the 4-bid victory, but they have that one loss, and the loss is in the Western Division. 2 weeks off, so we'll have time to talk a little bit more about them. But I want you to get in and talk a little bit about this Prairie View Grambling game. Alan, what are your thoughts in terms of this matchup?
I'm really looking forward to this matchup. I believe Coach Dooley is going to go with Starks. Now, last week he played both quarterbacks. Starks played in the first half and Conley played in the second half. Starks was 10 of 21 for 151 yards with one interception, and Conley was 10 of 20 with 77 yards and one interception. But that key pass by Conley late to save the game was crucial in them coming out with that victory. One thing I'm looking forward to seeing is if we can get a running game going for Prairie View. You know, our leading rusher was Christian Mosley with 10 carries and 57 yards. That's not going to cut it. So I'm looking forward to that. And that our defense, when you look at our defense, that was the one thing we were looking for coming into this season, that we're really going to have a respectable defense at Prairie View. And I think they showed up last week, and looking forward to see what happens next week. Now on Grambling side, they've got Jeremy Hickenbotham, who was 24 of 35 for 237 yards, but he was Grambling's leading rusher with 16 carries for 81 yards. If he comes in here running that ball against PV, as we saw that defense last week, we might be looking at QB2 by the second half.
Keep your eyes on the quarterback play in terms of what the defense is going to do as well. I liked what the defense did last week. I know they gave up some yards in terms of rushing, but compared, I thought they made some plays. I thought they was steady. I thought the offense didn't help the defense as much in terms of those drop passes. So I'm interested to see what the wide receivers do as well. But let me go to Charles to do that. Before that, I want to shout out G Boom Holly in terms of giving me that news to break on the show, giving him a little love and shout out in terms of what he's able to do, always getting it done in terms of shouting those pitches. And those pitches he had from the Labor Day Classic were all
phenomenal.
They were nice. They were nice. With that, Charles, as you see, we fall in love with Prairie View maybe a little too much. Give us a breakdown of what do you think about the State Fair Classic in the spring.
Interesting matchup. I mean, and I think Alan touched on it. The running attacks for both teams. That's something that I'm paying attention to. Like you mentioned, Jeremy Hickbottom led Grambling in rushing, and I don't think that's what they want. You know, when you have Keelan Elder and C.J. Russell both in the backfield, two home run hitters, if you will, and they didn't have an opportunity to get off against Jackson State. What concerns me was Gramblin's lack of a pass rush. When we talk about Grambling, we talk about their defense and their front seven getting after the quarterback. No sacks last week. So I think that was a very interesting stat. Prairie View did have 4 sacks against Texas Southern. What actually concerns me with Prairie View, with 9 defensive starters coming back and 4 all SWAC selections, Texas Southern ran for 200 over 200 yards. Ladarius Owens had 170 himself. So that sort of stuff jumps out at me in terms of, yes, Prairie View played a great defensive game and made the stops when they needed to make the stops, but way too many yards on the ground. And eventually that has to catch up to.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's going to be interesting to see how much of that may have been rust in terms of switching, how much of that was just the game plan there. And the question is can Grambling run? I mean, they like to pass. Will they be disciplined enough to run? I think it's another question in terms of those X and O's. So that's going to be fascinating to see what's on that matchup. But you also, as you talked about, you had Jackson State that ran on Grambling. We didn't see Prairie View run that very much. I don't know if they got away from it or they could not run on Texas Southern. That will be interesting to see. Will they be a little more focused about being conservative about being able to run? And what will that do with the offense supporting the defense or getting them off the field so they can be a little fresher so they can make even more of the plays? I do like what they did up front with some of the big men. Early in that game, they stopped the run. I thought the way that Texas Southern was able to run to some degree was the fact of how they were able to open up in terms of the passing game, which I thought they had stopped early in regards to what Texas Southern do. Because a lot of that stuff came in pretty much the late second quarter and the second half. And sometimes the switching of a quarterback that you didn't necessarily plan for as much can be different. And so I'm fascinated to see what that looks like and what does that mean moving forward. With that, as we finalize the show, I do want to get in the poll ranking. I have Jackson State at number 2 in terms of what I said with that Prairie View Grambling matchup. Grambling's on the outside. I have Prairie View at 3, but I want to give you the entire ranking and get your thoughts on that in terms of what that looks like, or at least introduce it and maybe just see if you shake your head at something. We snuck this out a little bit on Tuesday, but let's go into it. Receiving votes, Grambling. Let me start with Texas Southern, 48 points, 0-1. Really showed that they're a different team. We'll see what that means moving forward. The next matchup is against the next team in the ranking, which is Southern Jaguars, sitting at 1-1, 49 points. And then you have Grambling State just out the top 5. So in a lot of ways, you have a 3-6 matchup in terms of what you see for State Fair Classic, with Grambling sitting at 0-1 and 68 points. Bringing us to the top 5 teams. Delaware State hadn't played in a couple of weeks, but they will get going back into the MEAC schedule that is not a conference schedule, but MEAC teams will be playing in terms of Howard, Delaware State, and South Carolina State. Delaware State is 1-0 with that victory over Howard, 69 points. We're not ranked. Number 4, you have Arkansas Pine Bluff Golden Lions sitting at 1-0, 76 points. At number 3, you have Prairie View A&M. As I said, basically giving us that 3-6 matchup, sitting at 1-0. One first place vote, 96 points. They remain at 3 from coming into the season, as this is week number 2 poll ranking. And number 2, Jackson State Tigers sitting at 2-0, 1-0 with 5 first place votes, 108 points. Not ranked, jumping all the way to number 2. And number 1 is Alabama A&M Bulldogs sitting at 1-0, 6 first place votes, 113. Seems like the poll rankers believe in Alabama A&M, the Bulldogs. We'll see if that will stay over the course of the season. But let me go to you, Alan. What are your thoughts?
I agree with those rankings. Alabama A&M looked really, really shaky that first half against South Carolina State, but then they turned it on, and they were running downhill. So they looked really good. Jackson State, of course, you got that first win against Edward Waters, but we expected that. The win over Grambling was huge because the Grambling was the elephant in the room at Jackson State for a long time here. So to break that cycle and to win that game was a statement game to me. So I like them at number 2. I look to see what happens this weekend between Grambling and Prairie View. I know Grambling's got to have some hurt feelings coming out of that game, because that's one that they really should have gotten. They should have gotten that one at the end, but if they could have held on to that ball. So I'm looking to see what happens this weekend with them. But the surprise out of the poll, I gotta say, UAPB. UAPB with that 33-30 win over Southern, man. That I don't know if that says something about how much better UAPB is, or is that a big question mark over the heads of those Southern Jaguars this year? Because that was one that I did not see coming. I have to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
Great point. And Charles, I know you gave your update on the poll this Tuesday. So with that, let's call it to a close. And thank you for the listenings to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure that you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, the Dean of HBCU Sports, with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Sitting in for Mike Washington today is none other than Alan Williams. You can catch him at 1876 Sports and Culture. You know you can catch Charles and his crew on the 1400 Club. With that being said, we hope you enjoyed our conversation today and breakdown of HBCU sports. Again, we thank you for listening to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, every Tuesday at 6 o'clock. We look forward to you next week, and we will discuss the latest news in the lab, both Tuesday and Thursday. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, that's DrKenyattaCavil, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Dream big. We'll continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Charles.
Of course.
Alan.
PV, you know.
Oh, he had to stick it in there. Lecture dismissed.
Dismissed.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavill, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir.